It's a topic that seems so obvious, you would almost think you don't need to talk about it, but it's something that it really needs to be reinforced because sometimes we forget how valuable an asset our children are, both to ourselves and also to Srila Prabhupada's mission. Prabhupada, he sometimes referred to the children as our future hope. So it's very important we place a degree of emphasis on nurturing and raising the children in this Krishna consciousness movement.
Srila Prabhupada said that these children are given to us by Krishna and that they are Vaishnavas. And we must be very careful to protect them. He said they're not ordinary children, they're Vaikuntha children. And we are very fortunate that we can give them a chance to further advance in Krishna consciousness. So that's a very great responsibility. And Srila Prabhupada urged us not to neglect it or to be confused, that it is a prime duty of all parents.
What Uttama just said was actually from a letter that Srila Prabhupada to one Mataji, who was actually seeing that her children were less important than her service. So Srila Prabhupada, he really emphasized that it was very important for her to realize that sacred responsibility of parenting and see it as her primary service to Krishna.
Sometimes we see that parents, they focus so much on their own devotional service that they just leave the kids to the schools to raise, or just kind of let them do busy work, keep themselves busy, and while they're focusing on their Krishna consciousness. I see that it's very important that we take time to help our kids develop a taste for devotional service and to develop also a healthy sense of self-worth, that they are important members of society and that they deserve our attention and our focus and our care.
And research actually shows that in terms of marriage satisfaction and happiness, the years when parents are bringing up children, the marital satisfaction tends to be a little lower. Because obviously you have so many responsibilities, and children, especially when they're young, they need a lot of attention. But that's a normal growing stage of any relationship where you have children. And in the process of Krishna consciousness, that can also be a great asset for us in making spiritual advancement. Because we understand how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he described that in order to chant the holy name constantly, we need to develop these qualities of humility, tolerance, and patience. And when you have children, you have immense opportunities
Immense.
to practice being humble and tolerant and patient. And so it is actually an asset in our spiritual life to have children. And sometimes at the time when you're in the thick of parenting, it can definitely be a challenge. Our daughter and her husband were living with us when they were building their house, and they had one child. And then 3 years later, she got pregnant again. And it turned out she had twins. And twins isn't like having 2 kids, it's like having
4, because they're all going in different directions.
So that's a very big challenge. What to speak of having one child or children 2 or 3 years apart in sequence, but having twins, it's a big challenge. And fortunately for them, and also for us, they were living with us, so there was a lot of support for looking after the children. And it was actually, I won't say challenging, but it was a very enjoyable experience having the twins in our house. And sometimes when you have one child, and sometimes there's a competition who gets to hold the baby.
There was always some baby to hold.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of pleasure in parenting, but there's also lots of challenges.
Lots of mess, lots of noise, lots of crying, lots of kids that can't go to sleep. Nobody can sleep.
And so again, it's very important to see those challenges as opportunities for becoming patient and tolerant, and not to see them as impediments to your service. And that's a great problem we see. Sometimes devotees begin to feel that their family life is a burden and an impediment to their service. But it is not an impediment to service, especially when you reflect on those instructions that Srila Prabhupada gave in this letter of how these children are Vaikuntha children, and how raising them is a very great and important responsibility.
And it's our service.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually our devotional service. Part of the reason that we became involved in excuse me, working with grihastas is we saw that the children in our society were not always coming out happy and well adjusted. And we could trace that back to the parents not having a solid relationship where the kids felt happy at home and they could happily raise their children. And we see that children that are raised with lots of love and affection, they grow up to be very valuable members of society. Whereas we see nowadays that society is in a lot of chaos. And that can often be traced back to the childhood of those people that are creating chaos. So it's such a great responsibility, even just to humanity at large, to raise well-adjusted, happy, productive children. What to speak of when we're devotees, it being our devotional service to help them develop an enthusiastic, loving relationship with Krishna. And that takes modeling that we're happy and we're enthusiastic in Krishna consciousness. It also takes finding ways in which they can experience the joy of Krishna consciousness, and spending time teaching them. Often I see that parents think that their children will just absorb Krishna consciousness, and they will, but they also need individual time and teaching geared to their level of advancement and their capabilities of learning at the time. So I think that we need to be very creative on finding ways to engage Krishna's children in ways which they learn, at the same time have fun and find it enjoyable. Because we're supposed to develop love of Krishna. It's not something that we just force upon the kids, that we must do it this way and must do it that way. We hear anecdotes from children that were raised in Krishna consciousness that were forced to chant japa, and it was very strict. And now they say that they can hardly chant. Their voice doesn't want to, because they just felt that it was almost like a harsh punishment. So we have to be very careful that the mood we imbibe and that we teach our children, that's what's essential.
An important part of parenting too is also discipline. Prabhupada described how from, I think he said, was it 5?
Up to 5, let the kids have freedom.
Yeah, up to 5 kids have freedom.
Now that also is subject to much interpretation.
Yeah. And then from 5 to 16, there should be some, Prabhupada said, discipline, some strictness. And so again, as Uttama is saying, that strictness doesn't mean that you force the children to chant. And discipline, from the Greek root of the word discipline,
Latin.
The Latin root, means to give life to knowledge. So disciplining a child means not that you
are harsh,
but rather it means that you inspire them, and at times it might also mean in some activities where maybe the child is doing something improper.
We restrict and we correct and we change their behavior.
And there may also be some consequences that if they carry on with the negative activity, there can be some consequences. Maybe you won't allow them to go play outside that day, whatever the consequence is that you set. But the point is, it's not discipline to punish. It's discipline to help the child learn in a constructive, creative way. Just like we are disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And so disciple means discipline. And Prabhupada, he didn't control us by Vedic edicts. He didn't control us by a stick. But Prabhupada actually controlled us with love. And he controlled us by giving us knowledge that actually inspired us and gave us such a sense of realization that we felt indebted to reciprocate with Srila Prabhupada. So because of that type of discipline, Prabhupada's disciples would do anything for Srila Prabhupada. They would go anywhere for Srila Prabhupada. And so that is the example of spiritual discipline, of bringing life to knowledge. And so for parents, that's very important. They understand that you have to discipline your children, but you have to do it in a very loving, constructive way.
So as parents, as parents, we're obligated to provide the needs of our children. And those needs include the physical needs, and we don't want to neglect that in any way. We have to make sure they have, adequate and healthy food, clothing, places to live, that they're healthy, that we look after them when they're sick. We also need to look at their emotional needs to see that they have a very healthy emotional environment to be raised in, that there isn't a lot of put downs, name calling, that they are not afraid to share their emotions with us. It's very important that children learn how to identify their emotions, because when they can identify their emotions, then they can see what motion needs to be put into place to deal with whatever that feeling is. So from a very young age, if we can give children emotional intelligence and guidance, how to listen to those feelings and see what is the appropriate action. So very often we get afraid of children's big feelings, like when they're crying, they're yelling, they're screaming. We don't have to be afraid of them. Children are just trying to process their feelings. So we need to give them some space to calm down. It's not that we always have to stop them from crying, or, just give them some time to calm down, and then sit quietly with them and ask them, so what were you feeling? Why were you acting like this? And then we can teach them to see, oh, when I feel like this, what can I do? Then they learn how to manage their own emotions. And the younger a person can learn that, the better equipped they are going to be in life. Because we see that in the end, it's our emotional intelligence which really shows, enables us to be actually productive in life and to interact with others nicely. Just a bunch of book learning can't really be utilized without that emotional intelligence also.
Mhm.
And besides that, we do need to give them the, intellectual intelligence, the learning, the things they need to learn, exposure to all sorts of, knowledge of a variety of subjects. And we also need to give them that spiritual guidance. So we have to see that it's a very well-rounded education that our children get.
And that's a very important skill, as Uttama was saying, to help children identify emotions. And we often talk about Rupa Goswami's loving exchange of revealing your mind in confidence and hearing in confidence. And that's a very therapeutic process to help yourself process what you're feeling and experiencing in your life and communicate that with others. It helps you to see yourself deeply, helps you to process what's going on in your life. And as Uttama was saying, this is something you can actually teach your children, and it can be very helpful to them. There's one couple in our community, they have a 5-year-old who's sometimes
ADD, lots of energy.
And so what she did with this child, she got some pieces of colored paper, different colors, and she wrote different emotions: happy, sad, angry, frustrated, irritated, disturbed, all these different emotions.
Along with happy, excited.
Mm-hmm. So she made these into little circles and then pasted them all over her refrigerator. And so sometimes when the little boy gets really hyperactive and disturbed, she'll bring him over to the fridge and say, well, let's play a game. Which of these emotions are you feeling? And he looks at it and then he says, yeah, I'm feeling frustrated. And it started out looking like he was extremely angry, but actually he wasn't angry, he was just frustrated. So when he saw he was frustrated, it made him a little easier to deal with what he was experiencing, and then to decide what he could do to minimize that frustration. And the Mataji told us it was quite remarkable how that helped to change her child and help him to not get so hyperactive and have so many outbursts.
So we see that when we become a parent, it's very important to learn good parenting skills. We may not have been raised in a way that we want to raise our children, so we may have to go out and learn effective parenting skills. Just like we encourage devotees when they're about to be married to learn the skills to have a good relationship, learn relationship skills, because we don't all naturally have them. So sometimes also we don't naturally have all the parenting skills we need. So we shouldn't be afraid or neglectful to go out and get the skills that we need to do some of the most important things in our lives. Have good relationships, raise our children nicely. Very important to get the skills that they need.
And all of us have probably seen something in our parents that we thought, I never want to do that with my children. However, there's a tendency.
And then we catch ourselves doing it.
At times of our lives where we're under stress, which is common in parenting, it's very easy to revert to those patterns, maybe negative patterns, which your parents might have exhibited. And that's why it's very important to very consciously decide how you're going to parent. And so that's why we talk so much about the importance of principles and values. And how principles and values can be a guiding force in your life. So at those moments when you come home and there's 999 pieces of Lego all over the whole house, and all the cushions off the Chesterfield are on the floor, and every single coat's off the coat rack.
Making a nest.
And the kids are kind of yelling, and you just feel like flipping out and getting angry. You can pause for 1 minute, take a deep breath, and you can think, what are my values? How can I respond to this situation according to my values? Focus on children's welfare. That you can try to respond to that situation in the mode of goodness rather than just react instinctively from your material conditioning, which would just probably be to start yelling at the children and screaming to clean this up, and you're driving me crazy.
I'm hearing myself do all of those negative things.
So again, it's not easy, but it's like we can consider there's parenting in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So in ignorance, I would probably just neglect my kids and ignore them and just go to some other part of the house and just completely not do anything. And in passion, I might start yelling at them and screaming and maybe discipline them in some harsh way. Or in the mode of goodness, I could think, what can I say to my children? That I might tell my kids, well, I just came home from work and it was
Looks like you've been having fun,
yeah.
But we need to clean up. Why don't we all do it together?
Yeah. So you find some way to do it in the mode of goodness. And so Bhagavad Gita explains how the modes are competing for supremacy. And Prabhupada says how you have to practice the mode of goodness. And by practicing the mode of goodness, you come to pure goodness. And pure goodness is Krishna's nature. And when we attain pure goodness, we can actually associate with Krishna. So those situations are opportunities for us to move towards goodness and pure goodness and come closer to Krishna through our behaviors. And so again, I want to focus on that point, how your family life and raising children is actually a very important part of your sadhana bhakti. It's not something different.
We also understand that children, they really learn what they live. So hypocrisy is very damaging to children. That we tell them they must be one way, but we're living another way. I was just listening to a lecture by Madhavananda Prabhu, and he was explaining how he was at one temple and the temple president was kind of chastising everybody. You grihastas, you should not watch TV. TV's Maya. We shouldn't be watching movies and TV. He was going on and on like this. And at the end of the lecture, all the grihastas were just kind of, sitting, looking in another direction. And his 5-year-old son piped up, "Then why do you watch TV, Daddy?" And he said the whole room just burst into laughter. So really, we're just making fools of ourselves when we're being hypocrites. We're not going to fool the kids. And hypocrisy is especially damaging when children hit teenage years. We're all saying that, we must be like this, we must be like that. But when we don't practice what we preach and we don't exemplify the good character of a devotee, how is a teenager going to be attracted if our character is not devotional and yet we're expecting them to rotely perform devotional activities? So we have to have the integrity Integrity means that there's no difference in our character wherever we are. So we have to have integrity that our home life, we're the same devotee as we are in the temple. We're devotees through and through. And that's how we will really impact our children.
Parents often become concerned and disturbed that their children aren't listening to them. And in reality, we should be more concerned that our children are watching us. They're watching and learning from us. And as Uttama was saying, if we have this kind of expectations of them that don't match our behavior, our instructions will not work, will not be effective. Prabhupada, he said once, philosophy without character, it's useless. It's useless. So it's very important to see that we have a responsibility to behave and act in ways in which we're always setting an example for our children at all times. And that's a very great responsibility for parents.
We have this philosophy that very often talks about detachment. In upbringing, in raising children, attachment is extremely beneficial. The child must become strongly attached to their parents and their caregivers, because that gives them their sense of protection, their sense of self, their sense of worth. And it's found that when children don't properly bond with their parents, they grow up in life to be very anxious or have an avoidant personality or a very disorganized, scattered personality. So when children are very young, it's very important to spend lots of time with being affectionate with the children, holding them, timely responding to their needs. And one of the big worries that is now occurring in society is that children aren't bonding because of these lovely devices. The mother can even be holding the child, and the child's whining for something or wanting something, and they go, just a minute, I'm just going to send this text. This always has priority, and the kid has to wait. Now, what does that say to the child? It says that the phone is more important than me. And they're finding that the children don't actually properly bond. And so they don't have that emotional security. We're thinking, we could mistake the philosophy to think that, oh, they shouldn't be so attached. But attachment at that age is very, very healthy. And it's necessary for their proper development in life. So, as Prabhupada said, don't be confused. It's our duty. And we're going to see how too much electronic time spent with electronics diminishes some of the other ways in which children develop. And so we're going to naturally see that we want to limit their screen time, their electronic time, so that they can develop in other healthy ways. So we also are going to have to not be hypocrites. We'll have to model that. Same thing. So parenting is challenging, and it helps us to actually practice what we preach. Because if we're not, we're just not going to raise a good second generation.
And also one very important thing that parents can do for their children and give to their children is to have them see that you as parents have a healthy, loving relationship. And as Uttama was saying, that makes children feel very secure and protected, and it creates a very nurturing atmosphere for them. And when children grow up in homes that are extremely conflicted, it's very hard on them. Parents, sometimes they can have arguments and maybe little fights. If the children see the parents are able to work that out and they still love each other, that's a very big learning experience for kids, and that's beneficial for them. But if there's ongoing conflict that never ends, it's actually very hard on children. We were working with one couple once who were negotiating a divorce. The 3-year-old was in the room with us, sitting in a separate chair, and the couple was having quite a heated conversation. And there was a pause in the conversation of the parents, and this little 3-year-old boy said, "It's all my fault." And the parents were absolutely shocked. And that's very common for children in conflicted homes to think it's their fault. So I'm just saying that to emphasize the importance of parents to see that the health of their marriage is very important for the health and development of their children. It's a very great responsibility.
So during parenting time, during the time of our lives when our children are requiring a lot of attention, we do still need to take the time to keep our relationship strong. Because otherwise we see this huge divorce rate when kids are at 20 years of marriage. The parents have just been focusing on the kids. They've been doing their own things, growing separate, and then the kids grow up, the parents have nothing in common. Empty nesting's coming along, they don't know each other, and they divorce. So we have to be conscious that we also need to work on our relationships even during the time of parenting. Even if you have to get a little bit of a babysitter, or just simply focus on taking some time every day to sit and connect and share your day. Very, very important for kids. So I think we will end here. If there's any questions, we can take them.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a question. Thank you very much for such a very deep insights. And how do you advise, or how do you deal with this feeling that there are too many variables that you cannot, that do not depend on you, that are out of your control? Just too many things that you just can do nothing about. You can only try. So how to deal with that?
So it makes us feel very overwhelmed and out of control. And I think that it's like anything we want to make changes in, we start small. What is the one thing we can control? So sometimes, like with the children, even if we can just find one time in the day when for half an hour or something we can spend some time with the kid in a productive way, don't underestimate how effective that can be. So start small, have faith that kids do really well with one-on-one time with their parents. If you can give your kids that one-on-one time now and then, it goes a long way to, helping. And so have that faith and deal with what you can deal with, and pray to Krishna for the rest.
Children really appreciate that kind of one-on-one time. For our grandchildren's birthdays, we decided to stop buying them things. And instead, we do something with them, or we'll take them somewhere where we're just spending time with them or doing something with them. And they really enjoy that and they look forward to that.
And really, that's what you're going to remember. Like when you look back on your childhood, you remember the experiences that you had with your family, not the things they gave you.
Yeah, that's very true. And one more question. You know, at certain age, from early age, children do listen to you. You are very important to him. But with age, you become less and less important. To a different degree, but less and less important to your child. So, and this feeling that again, how shall we just be an example to them? Shouldn't we just tell them all the things that we need to tell them, or it is too much for them and you just need to be a good example?
I think you have to pick your battles.
And likely that's occurring around the age of 14, 15, 16. Children are starting to develop their independence. And at that age, the children, they know you love you. They know they love you. They're trying to figure out who they are, but somehow they think, I don't want to be exactly like my parents. So it's kind of a paradox for them. And they're trying to figure that out. It's a little difficult. So you have to let them know that you love them and understand that they're trying to develop their independence. And you might want to have conversations with them that, what you can do to help them through that transition.
And at that age, you want to be very careful not to ask the kids closed-ended questions that just require a yes or a no, because that's all you're going to get out of them, and you feel like you're not talking to them. It's the time to really learn reflective listening. Whatever they say to you, just say it back so they feel understood by you. Because a big comment of teenagers is, my parents don't understand me. So when you feel understood by someone, then you feel more of a connection. I also think that we have to realize it's a normal stage of development and not to worry too much about it. Having said that, we still need to keep control of things that are really detrimental to the kids and, state our boundaries and the consequences of going beyond those boundaries. But those things need to be few and far between. It's also a stage where they don't always want to do things at home, but they do need to stay responsible. And all those chores and things that we give them at home, they give them so many skills for when they are going to go out on their own. Because nowadays we see that household skills are not so much taught to children. Then they go off to university and they're, cooking the spaghetti dry or something. They don't even know how to do anything. So we have to have faith that our kids do need to learn, and it's our responsibility to help them. We just have to do it in an understanding way without too much pressure, and in a way that we more try to be their friends. At the same time, we do have the ultimate authority that we have to pop up now and then.
Yes, thank you. And I think that it's the last question. As a parent, we all feel this pressure on us that our child or children need to become a good person, ultimately, right? We need to raise a good person. But being a member of Krishna consciousness movement, there is an extra social pressure. You also need your child to become a Krishna devotee, right? Everybody wants that. Whether we admit it or not, we all want, and I think this is an additional strain, right, on us, because we do not always know how to do it the right way. How there are no guarantees, again, too many variables. So, and I think that, don't you think that this is a little bit too much pressure?
Well, we also put the pressure on ourselves. Ultimately, our kids are going to become Krishna conscious when they get good association. So I think that instead of putting so much pressure on ourselves, we do need to do the best we can. We also, if we can facilitate any kind of sanghas for kids, where they get good association of their peers, and the peers and all of them are enjoying Krishna consciousness, that's the way in which they're going to advance. And we need to pray to Krishna, and ultimately they are individuals and they're going to make their choices. And I've seen that sometimes they go on and maybe they go to college, university, and they don't get good association, and they start, just because of no association, they go into more mundane ways of living. But if we've raised them to be good people, that's a great contribution to society also. And we need to have faith that at some time that Krishna consciousness is also going to click in. And you'll start to see it when they start to have their kids. And so we just need to do the best we can and try to find ways that our children can happily engage in Krishna consciousness. And relax.
Yeah. Do we have, thank you very much. I think I needed to hear that. Do we have time for one more question? It's quite practical.
Sure.
If a family is in a state of divorce and they have kids, should parents talk to them openly and honestly about the divorce and reasons and everything? Or should they, as if pretend as nothing is really going on, like to keep the kids?
You can't pretend. They're going to figure it out. Better that they hear exactly what's going on, but not minute detail. Like, you're obviously upset at each other, and you do not want to say all the negative things of your spouse that are not allowing you to stay in the relationship. It's very important not to have the kids stuck between who to give their love to. The children, we always need to speak respectfully of the other parent when the child is there, and not force them to choose sides or paint a bad picture of their parent, because they need both of their parents. So it's best to explain it, in a way that, we're just not able to work it out. We're sorry. We know this impacts you. It's going to be hard on you. And, find ways to make it, as easy on the kids as you can. And what's going to make it easy is if you can be respectful to each other and not fight over where the kids are going to go. And that's just so damaging to the kids. But they're going to know what's going on. So better they hear it in a respectful way from you. And you need to be focusing on the children's welfare while you're having the divorce.
Yeah, I think that would be the best scenario, of course. Thank you very much. We're just very, very appreciative of your wonderful association. And I think today we've heard so many important things, right, about kids, because they cannot fend for themselves. Thank you for fending for them today.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Shri Prabhupada ki jai.